good afternoon, good morning to some, and thank you for joining us today. We're delighted to bring you a webinar on strengthening mental health through movement. We know that being active has a positive impact on our physical health, but there are so many mental health benefits. To take you through this presentation, I'm pleased to introduce you to Natalie. Natalie blends 25 years of international experience with degrees in psychology and exercise science as she passionately connects with those looking to improve their physical, mental, and immune health. She is the Vice President of the Fitness Industry Council of Canada and CanFit Pro's recipient of the Canadian Presenter of the Year Award. Natalie delivers joyful movement and insights as a speaker, coach, and trainer. In this webinar, Natalie will provide simple ways you can move toward positive mental health by strengthening your body and mind to build resilience and better cope with mental health challenges. As we move through the presentation today, please feel free to pop any questions you have through the chat, and we look forward to hearing your questions and comments. Now over to you, Natalie.
Thank you so much, Olivia. Hello, everybody. Lovely to see you from afar, to feel you from afar. Thank goodness we've got these digital opportunities to still connect and still learn and have, from my standpoint anyways, lots of opportunities for wellness and health and fitness and everything else. So it's my absolute pleasure to be with you here today. I might have met some of you last month when we were talking about goal setting. We're talking about healthy backs next month. And so it's such a pleasure to be here for this little trifecta of health and wellness that I have the opportunity to share with all of you. Please feel free to use the chat with questions, with ideas you have. We'll make this as interactive as possible so that it can be as relevant and pertinent for you as we can. So I will share lots of different ideas. Some of them will really resonate with you. Some of them will feel a little bit further away. It's up to you to choose where it makes sense in your life, for yourself, for your loved ones, and how you want to do that. So I've had the pleasure of working in the fitness industry, as Olivia mentioned, and health for about 30 years. And we spent a lot of time in our industry looking at the physical benefits of physical activity, but now we're looking at mental health and how movement can very much strengthen that. So here is our strengthening plan for today. We're going to go over 4 things. The first one we're going to discuss is how physical activity is actually perceived in society, what you may think about, what might be stereotypes related to health and fitness and physical activity and the fitness industry at large, just to see how we stand, what we feel about all of that. We're going to look at mental health data in Canada in particular and see how we are dealing with mental health, what challenges might be there, and how mental health will likely or is likely impacting our daily living. We will see, as promised, how physical activity impacts mental health, and then we'll look into building resilience. So we'll have opportunities to see how we can strengthen mental health as a whole through our physical activity plan. So how is physical activity perceived? Well, I would like for it to be something really, really positive, but I need to fess up and acknowledge the fact that my industry has a reputation for being the no pain, no gain place, for being the place where I dare say that we use physical activity to a certain extent as a punishment and have done it in a way that has potentially negatively impacted how most of us feel about exercise. So if you think back about your first experiences with physical activity, so we'll think back to primary school when we were involved in physical activity and what happened in gym class if we were late, or if we did something wrong, or if we were incorrect with something. How were we punished in those situations? So let's say we show up late for gym class. What did the gym teacher do or have us do if we were late in those situations? Feel free to pop them into the chat if you want. I've got a few ideas of my own, but if you think back about how you were punished in those types of situations, oftentimes with physical activity. So I'm going to go see who wrote something in here. 20 push-ups. Push-up is the classic. I'm going to be honest, Olivia. Push-ups is the classic. Oftentimes push-ups, laps, running, suicides, which again, if you think about the concept of suicide, which is running back and forth between cones, that oftentimes they'll use in athletics and team sports and things like that. The fact that they're even called suicides, the fact that we're using that, I mean, think about the nomenclature that we've used in our industry, or that gym teachers have used or sports coaches have used, will very likely mean that a lot of us have this negative connotation with physical activity. A lot of us will be like, oh, I want to have an extra slice of cake. Well, I need to add 10 minutes to my walk so that I can deserve, so that I can earn food. And so most of us see physical activity as a punishment, as a expenditure for that, and then see food as a reward. What I would like for us to do is kind of switch that up a little bit to see if movement can actually be the reward in and of itself, but actually a reward because of the mental health benefits, along with some of the physical benefits that I can list off to you so that we remind ourselves what those are. But as Olivia mentioned, in terms of push-ups, those of us that work in the fitness industry, every time I will say, and we've switched it to burpees now because I don't know, it had to get harder for some strange reason. But anytime I would say, okay, guys, we're going to do push-ups, my entire career, this is what it sounds like in the room. Oh, whenever we say push-ups, because it was the punishment for so many of us when we were children. And the same thing with our coaches. So if we played hockey or we played tennis or we played anything else, whenever we would make a mistake, do something wrong, show up late, whatever, oftentimes we were punished with physical activity. And so it's perfectly normal that many of us don't partake as regularly, as often as we should in movement and physical activity because of that. We kind of grew up with that and took it into adulthood and took it into, even if we're taking it into active aging, it's one of those things that constantly feels like we need to remotivate ourselves to, constantly feel like we need to make time for, and tends to be, put aside from time to time. What I'm proposing we do with the mental health benefits related to it is bring instant gratification back in. The other thing we did as an industry is made it very, very focused on caloric expenditure, calories burned, and weight loss or fat loss, when in reality, lots of us participate in physical activity for a lot of other reasons. Yeah, for our social health, our mental health, our immune health, for things that are our physical health, the strength of our bones and our joints and our muscles, and to have energy and to be able to pick up our grandkids and participate in the activities and walk up and down the stairs without moaning every single time we take a step. So pulling it away from that as an industry and as coaches is something that makes it much more of a positive experience. And then connecting the mental health benefits, which are instant gratifications, as opposed to some of the physical ones that can take a little bit longer, helps us stay so much more motivated. And so hopefully by the time we're done today, you will be stimulated and motivated to participate in physical activity for a variety of factors, including some more related to mental health and some related to physical health, of course, and then be smiling throughout it, as opposed to feel like you are, again, punishing yourself for doing something that might be a little bit more of a negative connotation. So here's some data in Canada. So everybody has mental health. It is something we all deal with in different ways, and we will experience a challenge when it comes to our mental health. Not everyone will experience mental illness. And so we can see it as a continuum of mental health, just like physical health, presence, absence, and you'll hear a lot of terminology. Sometimes we talk about mental health, mental illness. I hear the term a lot now, mental fitness, which has us, pull it into something that's a little bit closer to physical activity, but it ranges in terms of continuum. So right now I'm focusing on people who are within mental health version of that continuum, so healthy when it comes to their mental health, or maybe struggling a little bit. That's kind of what we're looking for. That said, physical activity is also used in mental illness protocols as part of the coping mechanisms that we provide the people in those situations. In any given year, 1 in 5 people in Canada will personally experience a mental health problem or an illness. So that's 20% of us. That's 1 in 5. If we think about the people who surround us, if we think about the people that we see, if we think about our family or friends or loved ones, that's how many people within a year will experience a problem or an illness. We see that by age 40, about half of the population will have or have had mental illness, and approximately 15% of adults age 16 over suffer from an actual diagnosed mental disorder. So mental health and well-being are just as important in older age at any other time in our life. Sometimes the life events that lead to those challenges vary. They vary at any age, they vary within any generational change. And so it's normal for it to be a little bit different, but it doesn't mean that because we may not have the stressors of having young kids, we may not have the stressors of work-life balance, we may not have the stressors of changing throughout the retirement, it doesn't mean that we still don't have challenges that could impact our mental health. So knowing that it's there, and that there's obviously lots of different solutions, lots of different coping mechanisms that can go along with that. How can moving impact mental health? So these are 5 parts of life, 5 mental health capacities that can absolutely be impacted by participating in physical activity. And when I mean participating in physical activity, for right now, and I'll give some specific examples when we get to all of them, we're combining everything that is involved in movement. So it could be a line dancing class, it could be chair yoga, it could be walking in a walking club or on our own. It could be spending some time in the forest. It could be gardening. It could be all kinds of activities. It could be cross-country skiing, it could be downhill skiing, it could be a hockey game, it can be any of that. Essentially, we are engaged in an activity in which we are challenging our cardiorespiratory system and moving our muscles in a way that is positive for, let's say, 10 minutes or longer. So that's kind of the definition of what I'm talking about when I'm looking at physical activity. And I'll let you know in terms of the consistency, the best ways, that the best practices we can use when it comes to that. So let's talk about stress to begin with. And when I go through these again, feel free to please write down any questions you have in the chat. It'll be my absolute pleasure to get to them either throughout or at the end. What's mine is yours, and I want to, again, make this as relevant as possible for you. So physical activity has a positive impact on stress. Yay. What happens is there are 2 stress hormones, negative hormones, cortisol being one of them, and norepinephrine, that's another one, that are reduced immediately upon physical activity. That's we've qualified it, runners might talk about the runner's high, that moment where you're like, I just feel good. And we actually do, if we pay attention to it, feel it. It's at a cellular level because the hormones are automatically decreased. There are more positive hormones that are actually increased in the body immediately, right away. And so what it helps is it having those stress hormones down, decreased, released from our bodies helps us tap into our concentration, our creativity, possibilities, and solutions focused. So this is why it helps a lot when we're stuck. And I say stuck, and I'm showing you 2 places when people tell me they're stuck. When we feel like we're stuck, sometimes we're stuck here because they're trying to think of a solution. We've got, a relationship challenge, or we've got a scheduling challenge, or we've got anything that we need to work through, and we're stuck. We just can't come up with an idea. We keep repeating the same thing. We feel stuck. And sometimes the stuck is here. So sometimes it's a mentality type of focus. Sometimes it's a emotional focus where we just feel like we can't get rid of whatever it is, moving our way through that, giving what's called kinesthetic stimulation. So rather than being auditory, visual, but kinesthetic, literally moving it out of the way, letting it go, letting it get out of us in that way can be really, really positive. So the best thing, and it's interesting because my husband actually was sending me text messages just before I came on today, and he had a challenging interaction with his boss. And we had talked about that. And I said, can you get outside? And he says, yes, let me just go outside for 10 minutes. And he literally just did a walk outside for 10 minutes, come back and release. So you're getting some, especially if you're doing it outdoors, getting some fresh air. It's a beautiful day in Montreal today. And so getting a little bit of sunshine and moving rather than being there and feeling stuck. It is an actual sensation. It's a physiological sensation to be stuck because those two stress hormones are racing through us. So we can let them go by moving with that. Hence, anytime we feel like we might feel stuck, we've got a need to decrease our stress, whether that stress is acute. So something like the example I give you with my husband having a challenging interaction with his boss, or something that is more of longer duration. There is somebody in your family who's going through something difficult in their health. You've just experienced a loss. You've just experienced change. There's an adaptation or resiliency that's needed, and it's a continual duration stress. Then moving regularly will actually have an impact on that. And we will feel that opportunity to tap into, again, creativity and possibilities. What's fun about the creativity and the curiosity that comes along with that is that it's the gateway to optimism. So again, if we feel ourselves doing the always or never type of thinking, if we see ourselves being more cynical, saying, well, this has happened, so it's going to happen again, and and it's just always, I knew this was going to be this way, and we're starting to fall into more negative thinking, well, moving, doing some form of movement and physical activity helps open up that gateway through curiosity, through I wonder if. That kind of stuff happens when we move. So we would like to do it as regularly as possible. It doesn't have to be a 60-minute sweat like crazy, hurt for 3 days after type of movement session. I would never suggest that anyways. A 10-minute walk can do it. So it's actually better to continually move as often as possible. So if you're thinking about your schedule right now, is there something you can do, or a variety of activities you can do for about 10 to 20 minutes most days of the week? That's what we're looking at rather than one long duration or high intensity type of movement session. So that's stress. Any questions about stress? Does it remove the stressor? No. Does it mean we will have less things, stressful things happen to us? No. What it means is we can manage our stress better. We can cope with our stress and anxiety better because of what's happening here. So speaking of anxiety, this is where it gets really fascinating. I'm going to geek out just a little bit. Physical activity in itself is a stressor. It's a positive stressor, but we are challenging ourselves to do something. So as opposed to our bodies being, a muff, our bodies being completely sedentary and not doing anything, if we are active, then we're moving. It's a positive type of stress. And what we do when we learn through those positive stressors is it can mimic the response that can come with anxiety. So as we learn to get better at pickleball, as we learn to meditate, as we learn to do a sequence in our Tai Chi class, what we do is we teach ourselves how to deal with stressors. And so we can use that to mimic that, and our brains will learn to do that when there's a situation that has anxiety or stress around it. We will use the same pathways that we did when learning the Tai Chi sequence to then be able to apply it to a situation where there's anxiety. So we're helping ourselves out again by learning coping mechanisms that through time can be really positive. So we can learn to manage our responses and not be overwhelmed by them in other situations. It helps us respond instead of react, because animals react. If you look at some things you might see on social media, we would think that humans react to, but humans are capable of, between, when something happens to them, have time to reflect and then respond. And that's one of the things, the learnings that happens, those neural pathways that take place during physical activity that we can then apply to anxiety. So stress and anxiety. Feel free to let me know if there's any questions on there or something that you're like, I wonder if this activity is one that could be helpful for that. You can go ahead and ask those questions. Or what about in situations like this, Nathalie? Feel free to pop those into the chat. Olivia and I will keep an eye on those. One thing that happens during physical activity is that we breathe. Sometimes our heart rate will increase, and we will be utilizing that heart rate, that increase in oxygenation, to be able to, again, release those negative hormones and build the positive hormones. Mindful breathing, so that you will very likely utilize in either, again, meditation, which is more sedentary, but a moving meditation like walking, or a moving meditation like cooking. I use cooking a lot as a moving meditation because we're repeating the same move, especially if it's a recipe you've done a gazillion times. The normalcy of that helps you come into a nice flow state when it comes to your breath. Something that you will use in yoga, in Pilates, in Tai Chi, and all of those types of situations. Allows you to, as I explained here, switch from what's called our parasympathetic nervous system, our sympathetic nervous system, to the parasympathetic nervous system. These are the two ways that they're divided. We all have them. Most of us spend a lot of time overusing our sympathetic nervous system. It's the fight, flight, freeze. It's the one, to a certain extent, I'm using now to talk and communicate. It's the one that is turned on and does things and responds to things. And some of those situations can be very stressful. Some of those situations are just day-to-day living of things we have to do. We have to change our schedule. We have to do this. So they're action type of activities. And that's where the sympathetic nervous system comes in. Your parasympathetic nervous system does the rest, digest, heal. It is what we do when we sleep. It is what we do when we are calm, and we spend less time in it than we could. So we're actually going to do it together now. Yay! Everybody says yay. We're going to do a little breathing exercise. I'm going to pull myself out of the presentation and walk back a little bit. Here, let me do this so that you guys, there we go, can see me really easily. We're going to do abdominal or belly or diaphragmatic breathing. This is a little bit easier to do if you're standing up, but you can do it sitting down too. We can put our hands either on our hips, one hand on each hip, or one on the belly and one on the lower back. So you've got it nice and low over your belly button. And we're going to gently shift our breath through our nose. And bringing breath to nose does two things. One, it helps release the jaw, or release the muscles around the jaw and the skull around your head. And it also allows us to inhale and exhale through the same orifices, which means the speed, pace, and dilution of it will be similar. And that creates a bit of a metronome type of meditative feel, which is really, really nice. So once we've brought our breath through our nose, let's start the inhale under our hands. So start by inhaling. It'll probably take a few breaths to get it, but feel your hips, belly, back pressing onto your hands. Think of it, I like to call it Buddha breathing. We're actually pressing through and opening up our belly as we do. Most of us spend most of our time chest breathing way up here. That said, our lungs finish actually quite low, where our respiratory system ends and our internal organs, our abdomen begins, and actually sits a lot in our back. And so we're trying to create this more barrel-shaped breath rather than breathing in the front and the top of our lungs. Once you feel like the breath has gotten there, you can go ahead and release the hands if you know that you're actually breathing, including your belly. And I'll let you stay with the breath as I explain what's happening. Our diaphragm is like a dome between our respiratory cavity and our abdominal cavity. It kind of separates the two. When we breathe low like that, what we use is the bottom tips of our lungs to press onto the diaphragm. And when the diaphragm gets squished like that, it gets stimulated and it gives a little nudge to the parasympathetic nervous system. So right away, we're using our own breath as simply as that, using the diaphragm to let our body know it can rest, digest, and heal. How about we do 3 more? Does that sound good? One more. And if you need to put your hands back there, you can put your hands back there. All right. And now let me know in the chat how you feel after that. How did it feel to do a abdominal breath, belly breath, diaphragmatic breath? Hopefully nobody's asleep. I actually still have you guys. Hello. Feels nice. It feels so. Usually what the sensations I hear are calming, relaxed, etc. There are some people who will say a little dizzy, which is common. So don't worry about awakening. Oh, very nice word. Nice, that's a good word. Some people say it's a little bit dizzying. Because we're breathing with so much more of our lung capacity, the oxygenation of that sometimes is like, whoa, that was a lot. So it takes a little bit of practice to get the hang of like just how much breathing we want to do when it comes to that. Feels good. Somebody says, thank you for sharing that. But we can, as easy as that, then think about how we move and how we breathe. And so mindful breathing, this is an example of doing it. There's lots of different techniques to it, is very much an integral part of most practices related, like I mentioned before, Tai Chi, yoga, Pilates, etc., mindful meditation, moving meditation, all of those will have breathing there. So what a lovely opportunity for us to not only work our muscles, our joints, etc., but our heart and be challenged from a physical activity way in terms of that, but also just the breathing in and of itself is really powerful. I say it in my yoga classes all the time that if you're breathing and you're moving, you get an A+ in yoga. That's just that is better than what most of the population is doing and can benefit you greatly for the rest of your day. All right, let's move into the next part. So let's talk about depression. Physical activity does help alleviate the symptoms of depression. So what it does is it promotes neural growth, reduces inflammation in the brain, and new activity patterns are produced that promotes feelings of calm and well-being that can be really great when it comes to that. It builds resilience and coping mechanisms. So it helps us know that we can count on ourselves in those situations and build ourselves back up. And it impacts feelings of belonging and social health through shared interest. One of the things I hear talked a lot about is, spending time with like-minded people. Like-minded is one thing, and that is something that is really positive. It's also really nice to spend time with people who have a shared interest. They may or may not think the way we do. They may or may not be, think from a society standpoint, from a political standpoint, from a financial standpoint, or anything else. But we have a common interest that is walking together. We have a common interest. When we come together for some form of physical activity, it being virtual through the cameras and the Zooms and everything else, or it being in person, could it be walking club, pickleball tournament that's taking place, or just an activity? We go to the park, we see people doing some movement in the park. We surround ourselves with people who have a common interest. That common interest is movement, is health, is benefiting our lifestyle and adding health span to our lifespan. And that's something that helps alleviate the symptoms of depression. So as I talked about before, when it comes to the protocols around those mental illnesses, including depression, physical activity will often be used as a tool in order to help that. So these are the ways in which they can alleviate the symptoms related to depression. So we had stress, anxiety, and depression now. Cognitive health. This one's going to be fun. I hope you're excited, because this is one that really excites me. You can tell I get excited about physical activity and mental health. So physical activity increases the size of the hippocampus and decreases the inflammation. The hippocampus is the memory center of your brain. So how wonderful is it that we are actually improving, thanks to the health of our brain through movement, we are improving our ability to learn, our memory center, our ability to recall, as well as the enjoyment of what's taking place, because it helps us be focused. It helps us find mindfulness, as it does through the brain, through the hippocampus. It helps us do that. So it helps protect from normal age-related decline. I'm expecting a few people to be excited about that, because that's the one for me that is and I mean, it's like Sudoku, but with your body. So it's this brain gym of moving it. And I use this photo because literally anytime you do physical activity where there will be a crossing of the midline of the body with a limb, so whether you're doing, a Zumba class or a dance class or something like that, or you're moving through some yoga poses, or you're doing some stretching, every time we cross the midline of the body, it's brain gym. It stimulates your mind. It's good for your cognitive health, along with everything else. High 10 for that one. So physical activity improves our cognitive health. And sleep. I just did a couple of hours, a whole seminar on improving sleep. Sleep is a challenge. It's a challenge for all of us. It's certainly a challenge as we age. We still want to get at least 6 hours of sleep per night. We're looking at 7 to 8 if we can. It helps support the quality of sleep as well as the speed of falling asleep. It helps when we are physically active and regularly physically active. It helps regulate our sleep patterns, and patterns and routines are the key to better sleep. And better sleep improves mental clarity, executive function, decision-making, processing emotions, etc., etc. Now, here's what I've heard for 30 years, and I completely understand. People say this to me. They say, Nathalie, I don't sleep well. I have no energy. You're saying physical activity will give me more energy, but I have no energy. So what? It's confusing. And like, how do I start? How do I do this? We do want to turn the wheel of momentum in the right direction. A regular and consistent practice of physical activity, probably more in the first hours of the day, rather than we want to separate it from the last 3 hours before bedtime, helps stimulate our bodies, just like we do with children. We want kids to be active so they sleep better at night. So we want to then give ourselves the dimmer opportunity of sleep to slowly bring ourselves to sleep. When we sleep well, we tend to make better and easier decisions when it comes to our health, including participating in physical activity, including choosing foods that nourish our bodies and help us be stimulated for other things, etc., which makes us sleep better, which gives us more energy, which etc. And that's how we get the ball rolling in that way. So that is how physical activity helps improve sleep. has a great impact on self-worth and confidence. We develop new skills, new habits, create more connections in the brain. Being physically active has a wonderful impact, again, on how we feel about ourselves, supports positive body image, changes usually even the way we carry ourselves and our posture, because we're doing self-care. Any form of movement is an exercise in self-care. And so that reinforces the feeling of competence and self-control, which has an impact on body image, and we're boosting and building our self-worth and confidence. So that's what it does there. Again, these are things that happen quite instantaneously. The next time we move, we're like, oh, I feel good. We rarely regret being physically active, right? There's usually something there. Olivia is asking how long it takes until it becomes a habit. So, I mean, we hear the whole 21 days to build a habit thing, and it's still there. 3 weeks is a pretty good lesson. That said, even when it is a habit, it doesn't mean we're going to be motivated to do it every single time. There will be days where we will need a little bit more in terms of stimulation. Days, even for me, there's days where I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can do it, and this and that, and everything else. The habit is there. The trick, sometimes we need to trick ourselves a little bit into saying, I'm just going to do 5 minutes. Or playing a beautiful song that helps you get motivated to be able to dance and do something fun or something like that. So it will become a habit. We want to start slowly and progressively and build it in. And within about 3 weeks or so, we will start to see the repercussions, and then remind ourselves that if we stop for a little bit, we're not going back to the starting block. Our bodies, our minds, our emotions, our health will bring itself back up after just a couple of times. So if you have been in the habit and you've fallen off, bring yourself back on. You jump back in further ahead each and every time. So hopefully that answers your question, Olivia. Thank you for putting that into the chat. It is absolutely a positive part of social health and community, whether that is within our family, within our circle of friends, within our former workplace, within the communities and the places where we live. It's an integral part of it, and it's a really positive way to have social health and community, especially if you're doing something outdoors, even at times where it was difficult to do things in the past couple of years in which we were at proximity to one another. We were able to have spacing outdoors in movement and still be able to breathe fresh air and spend time with one another and have these positive interactions. So, right on time. We've got a few minutes so we can come out of here and see if you guys have any questions on that. I'm going to have a look to see if there's questions, and if not, I'll put us into the closing thoughts. So I'll review while you guys take a moment or so to put in some questions into the chat. When it comes to physical activity, all forms are good. Everything counts. We're looking at 10 minutes or more to integrate into as many days of the week as possible. It's something that we want to see if we can maybe still talk. Once we start singing, maybe we can change the intensity a little bit, but it challenges our cardiorespiratory system. It challenges our strength and stability of our bodies through endurance and muscle conditioning, and it challenges our flexibility. Most of what's out there does a little bit of all three, and so we can combine those types of movement. But the one that you are, which is my closing thought, the one that you are most likely to stick with is the one that gives you pleasure. Fun is the best predictor of physical activity adherence. So even if I would tell you, which there isn't one, but I would say this type of physical activity or movement is the best one, it's completely irrelevant. The best one is the one that you enjoy. Sometimes we have to try new things to find something new that we enjoy. And sometimes we can go back to those old favorites that we've enjoyed all of our lives, because fun is the best predictor of you sticking with it, therefore it becoming a habit and you being able to benefit from these mental health stimulations as regularly and as often as possible, and to reap the rewards from all of that. So I thank you so much, everybody. I'm going to pull myself out of the presentation. and see if there are any questions while I hand it over to Olivia.
Amazing. Thank you, Natalie. And thank you for joining our Explore Bias Bureau webinar. I think I'm going to crank up the tunes and dance tonight, and that'll be my
There you
exercise
go.
for the day. I love it.
Perfect idea.
For everybody who attended, there will be a link to the recording that is going to be shared by email. So even if you didn't have a chance to attend in person today to watch live, anyone who registered will get that link. And you can also watch past webinars that we've done with Natalie or with a few other speakers on our website at spiritlife.ca. Under the future webinars page, I will send that link. Bless you, Natalie. I will send that link through to everybody as well. So thank you again for attending, and everybody gets a few more minutes back in their day.
Excellent. And I'll see you guys next month talking about some movement solutions for back pain if you guys want to come in then. Thank you, Olivia. Thank you so much for hosting.
Thank you, Natalie. Take care.